I think it will be the most revolutionary innovation that we've seen in the tech space since the cloud. Um, there is a bit of a hype cycle that we need to go through first, and it really is going to sort of come back to doing it right, doing it efficiently, as opposed to just sort of chasing things because everyone's talking about it.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. This is Darren Pulsford, Chief Solution Architect, author, and most importantly, your host. On today's episode, Embracing Data Ops with founder of NorthLabs, Collin Graves. Collin, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Darren.
Hey, before we dive into data operations and the importance, and you and I were talking before we started recording about shiny objects. I'm all about shiny objects. I chase them all day long, but it goes back to fundamentals. But before we start that, my audience wants to know who is Collin Graves?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I've been in the cloud computing space for 17 years. I got my start while I was serving in the Air Force. I started out turning wrenches on the B-1, which, if you're not familiar, it is the coolest plane to ever exist. Spent a lot of time in the Middle East with that because it is the most active aircraft since 9/11. So it's been put through its test for a long time. And then I transitioned to Ramstein Air Base and was a flying crew chief on the C-130J Hercules, and also served with NATO Special Operations in Africa, the former Soviet Union, and the Middle East. So I was the least cool person on an aircraft at all times, at least 280 days a year for many years. So quite a humbling experience to have, pilots, really cool, load masters, really cool, sometimes 82 Navy SEALs, Green Beret, Delta Force, and then me. And so I was responsible not for anything tech related. I was responsible for the health and security of the aircraft on the ground. And I was a self-taught cloud guy. My dad sent me a link back in 2007 about how Amazon was making a push into the cloud. And I remember walking to an aircraft in the chill of winter in South Dakota, which any South Dakotans, Westerners for that matter, who are listening to this know just how brutal that is. And I thought to myself, I think this is a really interesting concept, this sort of subletting data center space, essentially.
Yeah.
And I have to learn a bunch about this. And here we are, 17
here we are.
17 years later. Yeah.
Well, first off, thank you for your service.
Oh, thanks.
I've had a lot of veterans on the show, and I'll probably tear up at some time, but that's okay. I'm not sad. I'm happy. So, and I love how you said, the crew master is not the most glamorous job, but you got to meet some really cool people, I bet.
It was, being able to serve with those folks. I think when we talk about the leadership required to run a business, to manage projects successfully, that's what the military does really well. And
Yeah.
I had the good fortune to serve with the most elite people in that capacity. This idea of really progressive mission, sometimes life-threatening mission, sometimes just going in to rescue someone who was stranded. But being able to delegate as far down the totem pole that they do, and just know that you've got each other's backs, the muscle memory is there, you're well orchestrated. It was really something to see, and not something that I take lightly, being able to partake at least in a small way in those missions.
Well, that's pretty awesome, and some great life lessons there. And we could talk about this for the next half hour, but I already promised my audience we're going to talk about data operations and really the fundamentals. Before we get there, though, let's talk first about the shiny objects that are distracting us from all this. So, number one distraction, what would you say is today?
Well, right now it's Gen AI.
It's Gen AI.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Everyone wants to use Gen AI, and for good reason. I think it has I think it will be the most revolutionary innovation that we've seen in the tech space since the cloud. Um, there is a bit of a hype cycle that we need to go through first, and it really is going to sort of come back to doing it right, doing it efficiently, as opposed to just sort of chasing things because everyone's talking about it.
Right. And I agree with you totally there. Where are they going to land? Your job and what we talked about beforehand was we're going to create a foundation for them to land on because ultimately it comes down to data.
That's right. I mean, if you think about the analogy that I abuse is that of building a house because
Okay.
it makes sense to a lot of people. Right now, Gen AI, machine learning, any of these more advanced topics are sort of like that dream game room upstairs on the second story. And you when you're building a house, you just want that game room to be done so you can enjoy it. But if you don't build the house in the first place on a proper foundation, if the concrete isn't poured, if the rebar isn't laid, eventually you might see your game room, but you're not going to be able to really enjoy it for very long before the house topples over. And I say that because, and it may seem very obvious to your listeners, but I see that every day with our customers.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing, and here's the big fear of the hype cycle is I put it in a sandbox and it never leaves. And
Mm.
frankly, that's where AI has been for the last 10, 15 years is in a sandbox. Really cool. I have data scientists because I was told I needed to have them. I have a chief data officer because I need that, right? Because I was told my data scientists say I need that. But they create these one-off experiments and then I have no operations afterwards. How do I make it real? I'm seeing the same thing with Gen AI. Same exact thing.
Yeah, we're in a place right now where, if depending on who you believe, any of the big research or consulting groups out there, we're in a position where the typical consensus is that 85% or 80% of data projects are dubbed either underperforming or complete failures
Yeah.
by executive teams. And this is in an era where there's more data than ever before. There's a mutual understanding that data is more of an asset than ever before. So, why are we putting ourselves in a position where we have just about a 10% chance of success of truly making this stuff move the needle for the organization? And it's really sort of what you called out. We're rushing into things without first making sure the foundation is solid. We're hiring these advanced people on the far end of the spectrum, when in reality, the biggest way to move the needle for an organization is to lay that foundation and gain that sort of unified, trustworthy area to ask questions of your business.
Okay. So I love how you position that. The data is there to help us answer questions about the business, or which could be about our customers or financials or employees. The list is long. What does a good data foundation, operational foundation look like? Because I don't think a lot of people know what a good one really looks like.
It's a great question. And it honestly looks pretty similar for most organizations, regardless of industry. There's a million things you can put on top of it that will be industry specific. For example, if I'm in manufacturing, perhaps I have more connected plant sensors. So I need more of that sort of Internet of Things
Right.
capability or something like that. But at the end of the day, if we boil it down to the distillate, you need a way to connect into your source data, put that source data into what we call a data lake, commonly held term, right? A place for all that data to go, warts and all. We're not worried about cleaning it up before it gets in there. We can iterate on the quality of that data in different sort of tiers within that lake. And then we use a data warehouse to create those curated, trustworthy data sets um, across those different sources. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is twofold. And this is really it. One, you're trying to get all the data within your organization, all that data that comes from different places, is structured differently, is named differently. You're trying to get that data to speak the same language. And we do that with data modeling. And then, secondly, from a sort of first needle moving perspective, your challenge is to get your end users within your company to trust that data more than the locally held Excel spreadsheets that they have on their desktops, because everyone has that. But unless you have both of those things, you have a sandbox, and you're probably in a position where your leadership is calling it underperforming.
Interesting. So I like how you put that. I need to know where all my data is. I need to capture my data, put it into some kind of normal space, so it's all talking the same, right? Luckily, Big Indian and Little Indian don't exist anymore. I don't even know if you remember those
Mhm.
good old days with, oh, I got my information from an IBM box. Oh, well, that doesn't talk to anything else in the world.
Right.
Lucky you, right? But normalizing your data, meaning a date is a date is a date, or an address is an address, or whatever the case may be, and then getting your end users, to trust that golden data. That sounds like a solid foundation. I do have a question though about the data lake and central. With as much data as we're generating, do I have to copy all my data into one place in order to make it usable? Do you know where I'm going with that? Because I could be 50, 100 petabytes of data in multiple data centers. Do I really need that all in one place, or is there a way that I can manage that across multiple locations as well?
No, it's a great question, and one I get asked a lot. I mean, if you think about the statistics, again, statistics are just that. So take it with a grain of salt. But the average manufacturing organization, we work a lot in manufacturing, since 2016 has gone from having fewer than 70 data producing systems internally within their organization. Fast forward to today, they have more than 130 in an average manufacturing organization. That is a lot of systems. And so people always tell me, my God, where do I even begin with this? The
Yeah,
fact
yeah.
of the matter is this, it's almost like the Pareto principle, right? Of those 130 systems, maybe if you even have 15, there are going to be there's going to be about 10% of those systems that are going to drive 80 to 90% of the
Of your
potential
decisions. Yeah,
in your
yeah, yeah,
organization.
yeah. Yeah, that
So you
makes sense.
think ERP, you think CRM, you think your manufacturing execution system, transportation, warehouse systems for, there's really a handful of systems that matter initially. And then you get to a point where you can iterate on top of that, add another system in the future if you need to. But where most organizations end up failing, I would argue, Darren, is exactly what you said. Okay, in order to get started doing this, I'm first going to hook up to 130 systems and we're going to boil the ocean. And I take the exact opposite approach of start small, one bite of the elephant at a time. Of those 10% of systems, there are probably two or three that matter the absolute most. Let's get
Focus
those,
there first.
let's make it trustworthy, and then we'll expand from there. But anyone trying to boil the ocean is just buying themselves a whole lot of R&D cost.
I really like that approach, because what you do is you're identifying your data sources that are the most critical. You're building that trust with your end users. That Because people, process, and technology, right? That's one of my taglines for the podcast. The people part is the most important part here. If I can get their trust, then the other stuff will fall in line really quick. So I like this approach because a low barrier to entry,
Mm-hmm.
I can provide real value quickly, and my core data operations foundation is the same, regardless.
And the big thing that when we talk about data operations, that first sort of the base of the pyramid, if you will, is data quality. the vast majority of customers come to me and say, hey, we want to do this, but our data is in shambles, right? We entered into 8 different systems. It looks slightly differently than the next. How do we go about addressing this? It seems like too big of a task to handle our data quality issues first before we get into actually being data driven. And I always turn it back to exactly what we're talking about. If we can identify the 2 or 3 systems that are most important, the easiest litmus test for your data quality is to build that data infrastructure. You take a little tiger team of people, you get a little tiger team process going, you ingest those very small number of sources, and that team goes, okay, this data is accurate relative to my local spreadsheets that I crunch, or hey, here's where we're seeing drift. And either my local file is wrong, which is sometimes the case,
Right.
or hey, we need to tweak the model and fix it. But now all of a sudden, you're in a position of having greater data integrity, and you've skipped ahead a few chapters because now you can use the data from those 2 or 3 systems to actually drive forward looking innovation or results.
It's amazing to me when we talk about, well, I have a couple questions. So the first question I have is, how do I prevent that data from constantly being dirty? Are there techniques? Because, all right, I clean the data once, but I'm still getting data from something that's generating garbage,
Mm-hmm.
or not necessarily garbage, but noisy data, right? I'm Do I go all the way back to the data source or the data generator and say, knock it off? And what if the data generator is a person, right? Because that's where most of our errors are coming from, is human entry, right?
That's it. That's it. Yeah, but that's now you have a manageable task at hand, as opposed to saying, "Hey, Darren, all 130 of our systems are subpar in terms of data quality." If we can start with that small amount and go, "Okay, the biggest issue rate that we have is with this type of data in this type of entry." Okay, we know that it's typically
Go,
this team that does
go
it,
hit that one.
and now you're adjusting your standard operating procedures with that team, or you're putting technical validations or conditional validations in place in those systems to say, hey, the
Yeah,
format's wrong. Go ahead and
like a
fix it.
drop down box, or validating an address,
You got
right,
it.
with postal service or whatever. Small cost for a huge benefit. I get it. That This makes sense. So you do go back to the source, try and correct the cleanliness. If it's human interaction, then process change possibly, or user interface change, but find the biggest boulder first, or the boulder that gives you the biggest win first. I could see that.
Anytime there are humans involved, you'll always have data entry issues. The question just becomes, how do I put strong enough guardrails in place to make people's lives easier, but
Right.
that also, ensures greater consistency within our data sets? It'll never be 100%, but you can build systems that can help if it's 95% accurate or 90% accurate.
So that brings up a good question, because I'm starting to do some work in this area for some of my customers on cleansing data, and they're getting data from the public. It's not clean at all. It's a mess.
Right.
And right now, the way that they keep it clean is they put a person there that reads the document, it gleans out of it the information they want, and then puts it into the normalized form in a database. That's done by hand, right? Because there's so much variability. Do you see a place for generative AI in this space to help clean data on data entry, or either data collection for old data that's noisy? Do you see a benefit there?
I do. Yeah. And it frankly doesn't require too many other tools to do that. If you could plug in a simple large language model to say, hey, we're going to get these addresses or these dates in various
A
formatting.
normalized format. Yeah.
And here's the context you need to understand. I need you to output the results in this consistent fashion. Again, we'll never trust it to be 100% perfect, but if our system's built correctly, you better believe you can eliminate quite a few of the issues and then have maybe that person going in and addressing the most egregious infractions as opposed to having to check everything.
All right, Collin. So let's talk a little bit more about the operations side. I like your approach. I really do on taking things. So how do I make this so I don't need you all the time, right? I mean, you want me all the time. I mean, you want the revenue, but ultimately, I've gotta handle this stuff myself. So what approach do you use to do that?
For sure. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that comes into play is just having really solid account structure, having really solid workflows within your systems uh, that are documented, automated, etc. So a lot of organizations will end up standing things up in a sandbox, and there ends up being quite a lack of controls and permissions and things like that. So for us, it's really about, again, solidifying that foundation of the house. Starts at the how the accounts are structured, how the data flows into the system before we even ever get into the modeling aspect of things.
Oh, okay. So this is really interesting to me because you're taking a systems approach where I need to document where my stuff is coming from, how it flows in the organization. All that ends up being pretty important, it sounds like. I can't ignore it, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. I mean, again, where I think one of the big issues lies with data programs is things get started with engineers building out the tech the technology aspect of things. So they can get the best components, wire everything together. But if you're not talking about how Darren, who maybe isn't an engineer, he's an end user across the organization, is going to access data, find data sets that he needs, report on that data, etc., you really end up lacking a lot of that trust factor that we talked about earlier. So you need to make it designed for your non-technical users in order for it to be successful. That requires a lot more thinking.
Yeah. No, I really like where you're going here because a lot of times we only focus on the data sources and not the users of the data. And if it's hard to use, they're not going to use it. They're just going to create Excel spreadsheets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means I just created a data silo that's out of date as soon as I create it.
Exactly. Yeah, there's just a ton of risk. When we talk about that trust within data, a lot of people go like, yeah, I'm going to make sure that the data quality is good and there's my trust. That's not trust. That's a prerequisite to trust. Trust actually comes from the standard operating procedures, the processes, and the non-technical end users knowing that they can be dangerous within that system and have it deliver value to their job function. Because non-technical end users have no interest in becoming a BI developer or a reports creator or a SQL engineer.
That's a waste of time.
It's well, they've got a day job, right? So
Yeah.
maybe they're interested on the side, but these people are already pulling their hair out to get done what's already on their plate. So trust comes with I know where the data is. I like the systems. I feel comfortable in the systems, and I know that I can find what I need. And really, like when you're first rolling this out to your organization, oftentimes you only get one shot before data trust takes a dip. You have a lot of work to do to build that back. So that's really why I stress that as much as I do.
So you guys, tell me a little bit about your company. You guys do pure consulting, or you have a software package? What's and what software packages should I be using for these end users, or is it highly dependent on the organization and the sector that they're in? Tell me more about that.
Sure. Yeah, NorthLabs is a highly regarded, what I call full cycle or full service data operations partner for our customers. So we're helping from the design phase through the implementation phase and then through to the ongoing operations and management of those systems. And we take a very interesting approach relative to the market. where all of our projects are led by and overseen by our US principals. These folks have 15 years of experience, have helped deliver hundreds of workloads. A few of them have PhDs in the data realm, but they're backed by typically our dedicated foreign office in the Philippines, which radically reduces that cost footprint for customers. So you get that US presence, but then you get that cost efficiency
Cost
that
efficiency.
comes with us leveraging our Philippines employees as opposed to us coming in and saying, "Hey, yeah, it's $500 an hour. Sorry about it." Now we can reduce that by 80%, get more done, achieve more velocity, have more flexibility, and ultimately have more eyes on your program to ensure it's running successfully. So we take a very agnostic position. There are a lot of great tools out there. Our strongest alliances in the market are with Amazon Web Services. Again, I was one of the first 10 fully certified
Yeah,
Amazon
yeah, you're doing
in
this
the
in the
world.
cloud,
So it's what I know. We do a lot of work with Snowflake, but we also love tools like Databricks. And we all, there are a myriad of other tools out there that can get the job done. The question becomes, what do I need and when? And what am I not going to have to pay through the nose for during the initial build phase of this? Because everyone loves to sell you annual contracts. And frankly, the biggest advice I give customers is all of these tools are pay as you go. Why would you
right?
sign an annualized contract just to recognize CapEx if it's going to be 10 times as expensive as what you need? Right? Bake in some capex function for it and spend a lot less, so your R&D footprint isn't so egregious. Um, but all of the foundations look pretty similar. You need a hyperscaler. You need raw object storage for the data lake within that hyperscaler. So whether that's Azure Blob, whether that's Amazon S3,
Amazon
both
S3.
super
Yeah.
cheap, and then you need a data warehouse, whether that's Amazon Redshift, whether that's Snowflake, whether that's Databricks. It doesn't really matter. There are pros and cons to all of them, but that structure is generally very similar for the vast majority of organizations.
Okay, so because you guys have done this, um, you're the experts in it. It's better to bring you guys in to help set things up, help set new processes. Because I imagine there's new processes being developed. So this is a deep engagement that you guys have with your customers because you're training them on how to leverage their data to be more effective. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, we want to get married to our customers and not date. We definitely don't take on a lot of ticky tack short term projects because there's so much more involved in the ongoing maturity of a data program. The benefit is our cost footprint gets to be a lot less because of how we're structured from a delivery standpoint. So typically we're not breaking any budgets with our involvement, but you get the benefit of having a team who's delivered more than 1,000 of these workloads to
Yeah,
customers
yeah,
over time, and you get
that's
our that sort of
invaluable.
brain trust of the organization.
Yeah, that's invaluable information. So, if people want to find out more, Colin, about you and your organization, where do they go?
NorthLabs.com is the easiest way to find our company. I am not on social media aside from LinkedIn, and you can find me there at /Collin Graves. Fun, shocker. But I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I try and share everything I've learned over the last 17 years with people, both on LinkedIn as well as an email newsletter. And if there's anyone out there who's sort of thinking about how to get started, doesn't quite know what that first domino should be for them to flick over, we help put those plans in place for free. So these people, you can go to buildmydatablueprint.com, where we will engage with you in a multi-week sort of introductory strategy session. It costs nothing. It's a great way to build your confidence in how to build your data environment and data operations moving forward. And we love to help people solve these problems and use our experiences to do so.
Hey, this has been great. I've learned a lot. I love your approach, and it's like embracing data ops. That's what we're doing. Just embracing data ops. Thanks for coming on to Embracing Digital Transformation this week.
Absolutely, Darren. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and embrace the digital revolution.